Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 134. Today we talk to a couple that biked through Iran for over 3 months. Learn about the people and the places in this unique destination today in the Amateur Traveler.
I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into our interview today, I have a couple news stories for you. It seems like over the last few weeks I've brought you nothing but bad news when it comes to travel, and so I've gone on my way this week to find some different news. The first news story I have for you is good news indeed. In 2007 in the United States, on scheduled U.S. commercial flights, there were no deaths. So this was not a year when planes were falling out of the sky, although you may have gotten that impression from the number of things that have been going on with airplane inspections. And the death toll from private plane accidents also dropped to 491. That is the lowest total in more than 40 years. The second news story I have for you is one I've been sitting on for a little while, so it's not the newest news, but Israel is trying to remake its image. When you think Israel, you may think of what you see in the nightly news. What they'd like you to think about instead is beautiful women in bikinis and beaches. And so they're spending some money to promote Israel as a vacation destination, and they're trying to sex up the look a bit. I put a video up on Tripinator.com, which contains some of the original footage from the Israeli tourism industry, and so you'll be interested in checking that out if you're thinking about going to that country and maybe have a little different mental image. The last story may not make your day, but it certainly made mine. Men's Health Best Life magazine recently named the 10 best podcasts on the internet, and they included the Amateur Traveler, and I was quite pleased. Thank you to the editors and the writer of that magazine. What they said was, Chris Christensen created Amateur Traveler, a weekly hour-long audio and video podcast to keep you as far away from tourists wearing jean shorts and Big Johnson t-shirts as possible. Each episode explores world destinations with guidebook writers, journalists, and veteran nomads. You'll learn the best places to find lobster paella in Barcelona, how to motorbike through India, and where to go for a far-flung family vacation. Whet your wanderlust by scrolling through the archive of more than 125 past broadcasts. That sounds good. I think I'll check that out. Thanks again to Best Life Magazine. Links to all of those stories can be found on the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Friedel, who is talking to us right now from Tashkent, which I had to look up, but is in Uzbekistan. And first of all, welcome to the show.
Hello, good morning.
There's a little bit of a delay as we're talking all the way to Uzbekistan, but I'll probably edit out much of that in the final version of the show. You are currently on a long trip. What we said we were going to talk about in this particular interview was predominantly biking through Iran. But if that's a part of a larger trip, why don't you tell us a little bit about the whole trip, first of all?
Okay, well, my husband and I were working in London for 6 years. And we decided that we wanted to take a break from all that and have a bit of adventure. So we saved up some money, and we're currently going around the world on our bicycles. So we started in 2006, and we've been through about 20 countries so far, and we're just going to keep going until the money runs out or we stop having fun.
And I don't remember actually when we even connected. Was it when you were biking through Turkey?
I'm not sure either, actually, to be honest. We've downloaded your podcast for a while now and listened to them in the tent, and I think you sent me an email at one point, so somewhere along the line we hooked up, but I'm not sure where either.
And we'll probably talk about a little bit of the rest of the trip as well, but one of the things that I thought I really did want to focus on is your journey into Iran, because obviously that's a country that especially most Americans are not going to right now. I don't know if that's as true with European visitors.
It's quite difficult for Americans,
right.
Logistically. I mean, aside from all the stereotypes and conceptions that people might have, it's quite difficult because the Iranian government won't actually let Americans in unaccompanied, so they have to go on a tour. Mm-hmm. Now, that can be a private tour. You can hire a car and a driver and have your own private tour, or you can do like a group tour, and usually that's through an Iranian agency that will put together a bunch of travelers. So just for that reason alone, you really don't meet any Americans in Iran because it makes it a much more expensive country to go to than it does for someone like us traveling on European passports. And you do meet Europeans traveling through Iran, and Japanese, quite a few Japanese people as well, because they have a reasonably easy time getting visas, but not in the grand scale of tourism. It's more or less off the map.
Okay. Your final destination is where?
We don't have a final destination.
It's really more of a walkabout, as it were, if we were Australian here.
Yeah, we're just having a good time, and wherever we end up is wherever we end up. I guess we'd like to end with a trip across Canada, because that's our home country, so we'd like to do the whole thing across Canada on bikes. But in between, and when that trip across Canada might be, we just have no idea.
First of all, on the whole trip, what really stands out as some of the highlights?
If I can be quite sappy for a moment, I would say that one aspect, not something that we saw, I mean, we've seen a lot of wonderful things in terms of actually attractions, but the one thing that's really stood out for us is how nice people are around the world.
I noticed that in your blog. Mm-hmm.
When you sit at home and you watch the news or things like that, you can really think that the world is a horrible place and it's dangerous out there. And in every single country, we've just been received with kindness and hospitality, and people have been so generous to us. Just yesterday, we went to do our shopping at a little market in a small town, and I went off to buy some vegetables and some pasta, and Andrew stayed to watch the bikes. And when I came back, I discovered that 2 people had bought bread and vegetables for us. And just left them with us. I mean, they don't even know us. And this is a country where people don't earn a lot of money, especially compared to us. We're relatively rich. And they've just taken it upon themselves to buy food for us. I mean, that's really touching and something I didn't expect when we started out on this tour.
When I remember reading, I think it was when you were going through Syria, you were talking about continuously being invited in for tea, for instance.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Between one town and another, we'd have 20 people waving at us saying, come over for tea, come over for tea. We said in Syria that we couldn't go 5 kilometers without being called in for tea, and so you wouldn't get anywhere today if you took up all the invitations. And to get back to Iran, Iran was the queen or king or however you want to say it. It was just like the top of hospitality. When we were in Syria, people who had been to Iran would say, "Oh, wait till you get to Iran, this is nothing." And we thought, well, how can it be nothing? Because in Syria, every night we were getting invited, and some people would get quite upset if we wouldn't go to their homes, but we just wanted to be in our tents and have a little time to ourselves. And we thought, oh, well, there's no way Iran can be even more than this, and it was. And that really knocked us for 6.
And then focusing in a little bit then on Iran, since we wanted to talk about that. First of all, how do they pronounce it?
Iran.
Iran,
I would say. Iran.
And
not Iran.
No, I know not Iran. I learned to say Iran from somebody who grew up there, but he was not Iranian. So
I would say Iran, but maybe someone out there will tell me I should be saying it differently. I don't know.
And what were the highlights in that country?
Well, the hospitality, as we've already talked about. I mean, we couldn't even use a payphone without people coming sort of running towards us with their mobile phones saying, "Please use my phone. Can I translate for you?" I mean, you can't do anything there without someone telling you it is their ultimate duty, reason they are on this earth to help you. Really, everywhere you turn, if you have any problems whatsoever, there are 10 Iranians around who are just ready to be at your service, as I say. But if we go to highlight attractions you can see, I would say Persepolis, which is a fantastic site near Shiraz, down in the south of Iran, a beautiful archaeological site. That was definitely a highlight. And in fact, that whole area is just littered with sites. Persepolis is the best known, but if you take a car and sort of drive around, there's at least 5 or 6 other sites in the immediate vicinity that you can visit.
And I'm assuming this would be Persian?
See, now I'm not really a student of history, so I'm probably not the best to ask on this, but very, very old.
Very, very old, okay.
Yeah, I won't get myself into trouble by saying something that isn't true, but anyway, I'm sure you can look it up on Wikipedia or something and get all the details.
Well, my 2 guesses were Persian because of the area or Alexandrian Greek because of the name, but I'll have to look it up.
This is really not my highlight. I go around and I look at it and I sort of admire the beautiful work, but as for the history, I just know I'll get it wrong if I attempt to guess here, So you've got Persepolis, and then you've got in Shiraz itself. Persepolis is about 50, 60 kilometers outside of Shiraz. But in Shiraz itself, there are some really beautiful mosques as well. One of the nicest we've seen anywhere is done with a lot of stained glass. So at the right time of the day, the color floods into the prayer hall. It's called the Nasr al-Mulk Mosque, and it's really, really beautiful. In Yazd is a city roughly kind of halfway between Tehran and Shiraz, we'll say. And it is just on the desert. So it's got a sort of deserty atmosphere. You know, every once in a while sandstorms blow in. And we really enjoyed Yazd. It was a very laid-back city. There's some great little boutique hotels there, so you can kind of kick back and relax in a way you can't maybe in every city in Iran. Really relaxing places that are set around outdoor garden courtyards. And Yazd is known for Zoroastrianism, which is a religion I hadn't even heard about before I came to Iran. And that was what actually predated Islam. And some people still practice it. And so you get a lot of monuments and things in Yazd that are related to the Zoroastrian culture and religion. And so that's quite interesting to see. And then do you want me to keep going? There's a lot of highlights.
Yes, please.
Probably if you have a short time in Iran and you really can't see very much, but you've got to see one thing, then you have to go to Esfahan. There's a saying about Esfahan, I don't know in Farsi, but the saying is that Esfahan is half of the world because of all the monuments and beautiful things there. So if you go to Esfahan, then already you've seen half of what the world has to offer you, just in this one city. That's, again, a very relaxed city, a very cultural city. You get a lot of Iranians. They've got some beautiful bridges over the river that goes through the center of the city. So you get Iranians strolling over the bridges and through the parks that are all along the banks of the river. And then they've got this gigantic square. I think I read somewhere that it's the biggest open square in the world after Tiananmen Square, I believe, if I'm not wrong on that. It's big, anyway. And at one end you've got a bazaar, So you can go spend a couple hours wandering through a covered bazaar and buying your carpets and souvenirs and whatever else you want, spices. And then opposite the bazaar, on the other far end of the square, is a huge mosque. It's completely covered in these beautiful blue tiles. And then on a third side of the square, you've got another mosque, which was known as the Ladies' Mosque, and it's again covered in gorgeous tiles. And then on the fourth side, you've got a palace, and you can climb up the various floors of the palace to get a view of this whole square in its entirety with fountains, and it's really something to see. I mean, you can spend hours in this square just on its own, let alone all the other mosques that are dotted around the city. So Isfahan is really a must-do. Tehran itself, I guess we should kind of touch on the capital, because most people will probably either pass through it or fly into it. I wouldn't call it really one of the great capital cities of the world in terms of things to see. Quite honestly, you could probably skip it. We ended up spending quite a lot of time there because we had to get visas for Central Asia. And so if you are in Tehran, I mean, they do have some really nice parks. If you like, Iranians are really into outdoor things. I didn't know that, but when we first arrived, there was a lot of snow and it was really cold. They had the coldest winter in 50 years. We ended up having to get a bus for part of our journey because it was like minus 20, minus 25, and we didn't have the things to bike and camp in that kind of weather. And as we were on the bus, we saw all these Iranians out there with their tents, having picnics and going sledding on the hills, and I just thought, gosh, I didn't know Iranians were so into outdoor things. They were hiking in the snow, and we were starting to feel a bit wimpy because we put our bikes on the bus. So, anyway, in Tehran, they have some wonderful parks, and Tehran is right in the mountains. So you don't have to go very far out of the city, and you can go skiing if you're there in the right season, or you can go into these parks and you can hike up into the mountains with the Iranians. And I think that's a really nice experience, just to go and get out of the center of Tehran a little bit, because it's such a polluted city. And so if you can go north and into the mountains and spend a day having a picnic in the park and walking around and seeing some of the nature, then that's a really nice thing to do in Tehran. What else? If you're into the hiking and the nature, then you probably want to go up into the northwest. And the big city there is Tabriz. And all around Tabriz, there's mountains where you can go and do your cycling and outdoor activities. And apparently, we didn't get to see, again, because of the weather, but apparently they even have some villages that are a little bit like Cappadocia in Turkey.
Okay.
I don't know, you know Cappadocia?
Oh, sure, with the natural hoodoos.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I don't know, that's what I've heard. Apparently they have these villages built into rocks that sort of rise up from the ground and are very beautiful to see as well. So it's hard because we were there for 3 months and we saw so many things, and I don't want to miss anything, but the Gulf Coast, the Persian Gulf Coast, that's kind of interesting to see. I don't know if I would rush down there. If you go, you definitely want to go in the cooler seasons, because we were there in January and already it was good 25 degrees during the day, so I wouldn't like to think what it's like in June or something.
Okay.
But yeah, you get a lot of seafood down there, and the food tends to be a bit spicier, which is a surprise compared to most of Iran. Mashhad is the holiest city in Iran, because that's where one of the imams of Islam is buried.
Okay.
All sorts of Muslims make pilgrimages to Mashhad. So that's their great dream in life. I suppose it's like you go to Mecca and you go to Mashhad. These are the two big things. So if you want to see Muslims on pilgrimage and going to these shrines that are covered in gold leaf and with all their domes and beautiful decoration, then I suppose Mashhad is the place to go and experience that.
And is it easier to go there? I don't think you've been to Mecca, but I understand it's difficult for someone who is not Muslim to get to Mecca. But it sounds like you didn't have any trouble getting into Mashhad, and it wasn't any difficulty with you not being Islamic.
We were actually in Iran for a few of the Islamic, I don't want to say festivals, because not all of them were happy things, maybe commemorations
Holidays,
or things like that. Yeah, and there were a lot of religious processions, and some of them were quite graphic, shall we say. Some of them were mourning ceremonies, so people would take chains and beat themselves. Kind of like sometimes around Easter you see pictures from the Philippines of people crucifying themselves because they want to do that, in memory of Jesus. So not quite that graphic,
Yeah, the Philippine government put out warnings in terms of what kind of nails to use, for instance, if you crucify yourself, which strikes me as an odd thing.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to put this on that scale. It certainly wasn't like that. But they do have these chains where they will sort of beat themselves and they'll walk down the streets and they'll sing. And we were a little bit nervous at first. We thought, should we be going to these things? Again, as I said, Iranian hospitality is amazing. And people would push us to the front of the crowd so that we could get better pictures.
Interesting.
And they would invite us to have a picnic with them afterwards. And we were welcomed everywhere. And in the shrines, in the whole area around Mashhad, and also Qum is the other really big holy city in Iran. Not many people go to Qum because even Iranians will tell you that Qum is a very scary place because there are a lot of
that on your podcast, yeah.
Yeah, they'll tell you that because there are a lot of religious clerics there, and so the dress codes are a bit more strictly enforced, that kind of thing. So when you go to these places in the city, as long as you're dressed appropriately, no one's going to say anything to you, and in fact they're very likely to welcome you and be quite open and glad to see you. Going into the shrines is a little different, and it varies from shrine to shrine. Some shrines don't want non-Muslims to enter.
Sure.
In all the shrines you will have to wear a shatter. Shatter means tent in Arabic, and that's a large piece of black fabric that basically covers you from head to toe. This is as a woman I'm talking about.
Sure.
For men, you'd probably just have to wear long sleeves and trousers or pants. But as a woman, you would have to wear a shatter.
And would they have one there for you to use if you were a guest?
Some
or did
of
you
them
have
will.
to carry your own?
I was lucky in Qum. We were staying with friends, and they had a shatter, so they lent it to me. Sometimes you'll just step into the very start of a shrine or a mosque, and there will be a woman there, and she'll have a large pile of, quite honestly, they look like bed sheets.
Okay.
The ones they have at the mosque tend to be white with flowers on them, and they'll throw them over you, basically, just as you're going into the holy place, you know. And as long as you're wearing a shatter, it usually isn't a problem. But there is the odd shrine or mosque. There's one in Shiraz, and I believe also in Mashhad. They would really rather you didn't enter. Now, some people have snuck in. If you wear a shatter, and if you manage to carry it off well, which is not so easy, but if you can do it without dropping it and looking too clumsy, which unfortunately I couldn't, then you can probably go in and it's no problem.
But you were always clear whether you were welcome or not. Yeah, I mean, you really just kind of want to know the expectations. Is this someplace I should go or shouldn't go? And you always didn't have any trouble figuring that out?
Well, at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to a moral decision on your part, too.
Sure.
I don't think anyone among the sort of normal pilgrims would really make a big deal about it. But they tend to have, like, security guards who walk around, and if they think you've come in, then they might just say, would you mind leaving? We'd rather this is only for Muslims.
Okay.
An interesting experience that happened to me in Qum is we actually went in with 2 Iranian friends. But, of course, as a woman, I have to go to the woman's side, and you have to take off your shoes. And I didn't come to Iran really with the right kind of shoes. If you're coming to Iran or any Middle Eastern country, you're always having to take off your shoes. So you should get ones that just slip on and off, but I had ones with shoelaces. And so when I came out of the shrine in Qum, I was trying to put my shoes back on and tie my shoelaces while holding onto my shatter, which doesn't have any buttons or anything, so you've got to hold it all together with your hands. And, of course, my shatter fell off, and I didn't even realize. My shatter fell off, and I was just doing up my shoelaces, completely oblivious to the fact that I was kind of sitting there naked, in a sense, just outside the shrine. And the security guards came up to me, and they were very concerned that maybe I shouldn't be there. So we went and found my Iranian friends. So they had a discussion, and then they said, oh, welcome to Qum, welcome to the shrine, we're glad to have you. And I said to our Iranian friends, I said, what did they say? And he said, well, they just wanted to know if you were Christian. And we said yes, and because you were a person of the book, they were very happy to have you in the shrine.
Okay.
So even though I wasn't Muslim, I was a believer in the book, so they were happy to have me.
Interesting.
And that's really going to vary from shrine to shrine, and you just kind of have to feel it out. And if you're with Iranian friends, quite often they can smooth the way, and so. But I don't think you're never going to get sent down to the police station or anything for attempting to get into the shrine.
You mentioned something being a surprise. What was the biggest surprise in that part of the trip?
There's an intense amount of interest in you and a foreigner, more than we've experienced anywhere else. And so, everywhere you go, people want to know where you're from and what do you think of Iran. I didn't realize that Iranians were so worried about what the outside world thought of them. I think they're really very aware that there's all these issues about nuclear and that sort of thing. They said, aren't you scared to be here? Don't you think we're all terrorists? And they were just so happy that we had come to visit their country and that we didn't think they were all horrible people. And the other thing, maybe on a lighter topic, is I didn't know Iranians were so into poetry. When you go to Yeah, when you go to Iran, everyone's quoting poetry to you. Even the guy who sells you street food knows lines of poetry, and you go into a shop and there are pictures of poets above above the cash register. They're really a really cultured people, and they all know lines from their greatest poets. I mean, I lived in Britain for 6 years, but I can't think of too many people who could quote a lot of Shakespeare to me in the way that Iranians can quote poetry, you know.
I could do the Shakespeare one for you, but I'm not sure I could do Iranian poetry. Modern poets or older poets?
Older poets.
So like the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam or other things that are more obscure?
Khayyam, Ferdowsi, Hafez, Sadi, Shahryar. Shahryar, he actually writes in Turkish, I believe, because he comes from the northwest of Iran near Tabriz, where a lot of people speak Turkish, so yeah. You go into like a restaurant, maybe a fast food restaurant, order a pizza or a hamburger, that kind of thing, and if it's not busy, you'll find the cashier there with a little book of Hafez just reading poetry while she waits for some customers to come in, you know.
What did you use for guidebooks or resources to help you navigate Iran? You used Friends for one thing, but any other resources?
We did have a Lonely Planet guidebook, not the one to the whole country. We had one for the Middle East, so it had a small section on Iran.
Okay.
In Iran, we were lucky enough to pick up a Blatt guidebook.
Okay.
And that one was really good for history of the sites.
Okay.
Really, when we were walking around the site to know that the statue is so-and-so or whatever, I thought that one gave some really comprehensive history. And because Iran has so many archaeological sites and old mosques and shrines, and sometimes you don't always know what you're looking at. So that book really covered a lot of the monuments, and that was a really good one to have.
Anything that they either recommended you thought was a waste of time or that you thought they missed from the guidebooks?
I don't think there was too much they recommended I thought was a waste of time. For something they missed, because I'm coming really from the perspective of a budget traveler here, and because we're traveling on our bicycles and doing a lot of camping, we're not in a hotel every night. And we really enjoyed the Iranian hammams.
Oh, okay.
And they're not like a hammam you might get in Istanbul, for example, where you go in and pay, I don't know, maybe $10 or $20 and you get a massage and that sort of thing. They're very practical hammams. But if you're doing budget traveling, like if you're backpacking and you just got off an all-night bus and you want a shower, just ask someone to direct you to the hammam, because for about 50 cents you get your own private shower cubicle.
Interesting.
And in our experience, they were all really clean. And we could have a hot shower for as long as we wanted and wash our clothes in there. And so the Iranian hammams really saved us. We love them. We thought they were great.
So they're not a bath, steam bath, sort of the Turkish style then?
No, this is because a lot of people in Iran, it's changing now, but not so long ago, a lot of people did not have showers.
Okay.
In their houses, so they needed a place to go and have a shower. So it's a very practical thing.
Interesting.
So we really like the hammams. If you're doing budget traveling and you're doing a bit of camping like we are, that sort of thing, then that's great.
What is the cost of Iran right now for food or for lodging? How expensive is it? I'm thinking less expensive. Obviously, 50 cents for a shower is pretty good.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's no alcohol unless you seek it out on the black market. Okay. So if you like to drink beer, normally on your holidays, and you can cut that cost out of your travels right there. So that takes things down a notch. Now, you have to keep in mind that we're cycling.
Right.
So the cost for us is lower than if someone's traveling around on trains and buses. We spent 12 euros a day between the two of us. So 6 each.
But some of that is camping. So how much would a boutique hotel be, for instance, you mentioned?
Yeah, maybe I can give you some example prices. A budget hotel, so a simple hotel room, but usually with shared bathroom, is probably going to run you about 100,000 reals. Mm-hmm. If you go out for fast food, I mean like a pizza, we found it reasonably expensive. Like you can eat a couple pizzas and a drink maybe for 50,000, 60,000 reals. If you want to go out for kebabs, it depends on the place, but it's not too hard to spend a little bit more than that, 70,000, 80,000 reals. A bus ticket, if you want to go from Tehran to Shiraz, you're probably looking at about 90,000 reals, and shorter journeys like Tabriz to Tehran, about 60,000. I think most people say like maybe 25, 30 US a day, I think would be kind of your rock bottom budget. And then if you want to stay in like boutique hotels and so on, from about $25, $30, you start getting some quite nice hotels. I would say ones that are probably like 3-star, maybe, in the U.S. And they're really, aside from Tehran and maybe Esfahan, there aren't a lot of like 4 or 5-star hotels. And the 3-star ones are usually pretty nice, so they're usually pretty good value. And just for reference, at the moment, the U.S. dollar is at about 9,200 reals to the dollar. So if something's 100,000 reals, then you're looking at just over $10, maybe like $12 or something like that.
Okay. As you're doing biking around a country, how has it been difficult in terms of health?
I think we're probably healthier than we've ever been.
Okay.
That sounds kind of funny saying it with a cold, but...
well, no, that's why I ask.
Yeah. No, really. I mean, we've each lost weight. Mm-hmm. Well, to be fair, Andrew didn't have a lot to lose, but I had a little bit, so we both slimmed down. And really, we've been very lucky. We haven't been buying bottled water at all until we got to Central Asia and had no problems. We drank it all the way through Iran without any issue, Morocco as well, Syria, Turkey, no problems. But in Central Asia, we heard so many stories about people getting sick, we thought we're just not going to chance it, so we've been filtering our water with a water filter.
Okay.
At home, you would get sick once or twice a year anyway, and so that does crop up occasionally, but we just take a hotel and deal with it.
And you talked about the food being spicy at the Persian Gulf. What has the food been like? What's been the big hit for you in Iran especially?
Well, you read the guidebooks. Actually, this is one thing the guidebooks definitely get right. Food in Iran is not a highlight.
Uh-oh.
It's, no, it's not bad, but...
Eat to live, not live to eat.
Yeah, which for me, I live to eat sometimes, so... And we came from Syria where the food was really wonderful, but the thing is that Iranians, when they go out to eat, they like to eat kebabs.
Okay.
And so every restaurant you go to is a kebab restaurant, pretty much.
Okay.
Which is great the first time, the second time, the third time, and by the fourth time you kind of start to think, is there anything else to eat in this country aside from a kebab? And the answer is generally no.
So it wasn't quality so much as diversity.
Exactly. Now they love pizza. Oh my goodness, they love pizza. It's not quite pizza as we would know it in the States or Canada or Italy, but it's pizza. So you'll find a lot of fast food restaurants serving up pizza. I wouldn't recommend the hamburgers. They're not really a highlight because I do a lot of hamburgers as well. Uh-huh. But the real trick to enjoying Iranian food is that if someone invites you home, and they will, if someone invites you home, just say yes and just go and have a wonderful meal in an Iranian family, because when they eat at home, the food is great. They do rice really, really well. There's always rice. And then they do sometimes a lot of meat stews. And sometimes the meat stews will have like a bit of fruit in as well. So I don't know, like in Morocco you get beef and prune tagine. Then here you might get beef with some apricots in it.
Okay.
Or sometimes they have a vegetable. I don't know what it is. It's kind of like spinach. Not quite, but something in the spinach family.
Okay.
And they do some stews with that. They do some things with pumpkin and tomato and beans in it. We've eaten fish in Iranian homes. So at home, they eat really, really well. We've even had Iranian spaghetti, which is different than Italian spaghetti, but really good nonetheless.
Okay.
The trick in Iran is that if someone invites you home, don't be scared. Don't think, oh, what if this person's going to rob me or something. Just go. Just go and have a really good time. And you will eat until you pop, because they won't let you they won't let you go until you've had about 5 servings. So.
Okay. As we kind of start winding this down, a series of questions for you. The best day you've had so far?
Best day. Okay, the best day we had in Iran. Ooh, it's a toss-up. Okay, I've got 2.
Okay.
The first one, we did quite a bit of couch surfing. Okay. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with that, but where you go and stay with a local person.
Who you usually don't know.
Yeah, you find them on the internet. There are a few sites, and you contact them and you say, can I come and stay with you for a night? And they say, yeah, sure, I'd love to have you. Come on over. So we did that a couple times. And we did it once in Tehran and once in a small town called Borazjan, which is down in the south near Bushehr. And the guy there, his name is Ali, and he'd studied in America, so his English was very, very good. And he took us out for a Friday picnic at a shrine.
Okay.
And that was really good. First, he made the chicken kebabs himself beforehand, so we went and bought the chicken, and we put it on the skewers and seasoned it, and then we went out and had a picnic with all these Iranian families at the shrine on Friday. And there was an old guy who came around and sang to us for a little bit of money, and then we went for a walk in the hills, and that was just such a typically Iranian experience, and we loved it. Fantastic. And then the other one, kind of similar, in Tehran, our friends decided we should go have a picnic. But usually if you and I go for a picnic, we go on a Sunday, maybe around lunchtime or something.
Sure.
These guys decided we were going to have a morning picnic, so we were going to have breakfast in the park in Tehran, up in the mountains. And I just couldn't believe it. They called up all their friends, and darned if they didn't get 10 friends out at 8 o'clock on a Thursday morning when there was still snow on the ground to go have a picnic at like 1,600 meters in the mountains of Tehran. And so there we were, way up in the mountains, and there was snow on the ground, and we were all like freezing, but they had a big thermos of tea, and they just kept dispensing out the tea, and we had bread and chocolate spread, and I can't remember what else. We had cheese, and we had our picnic at 8 in the morning. Up in the mountains of Tehran. I mean, we had a good time. We shared a lot of laughs and stuff. But that just blew my mind that you could get 10 people out of bed for an 8 o'clock picnic up in the mountains on a cold day, you know?
The most memorable person you've met?
There's so many. All those Iranians who put us up and helped us, gosh, the list is just so long. I really can't stress enough how friendly those people were to us.
Okay.
2 people. They were worried about us for some reason. I don't know why they were worried about us, because we didn't share a language. But anyway, they had some concern for our safety. And so 2 of them followed us while we climbed a steep mountain with lots of switchbacks, 10 kilometers to the top, until they felt we were safe, and then they went home.
Huh.
It took us like 2 hours because we're on bicycles and we go slow, and we have to stop and drink water, and it was a steep, steep hill, and they took 2 hours out of their day to follow us up to the top of this hill just because they perceived that we were in some kind of danger. We still really don't know what the danger was, but they perceived the danger, and so they took it upon themselves. They could have gone to the police and said, you follow them, or they could have said, okay, they're 2 adults, they'll be fine. But they didn't. They took 2 hours out of their day to follow us. And
interesting.
that's a mindset I really respect.
What's one thing you wish you had known before you'd gone to Iran?
That it's not just about nuclear. When I went, I admit that I had a lot of the stereotypes that a lot of people do, and I was a little bit scared because I had to wear a headscarf all the time and dress up. And at first, I really felt like everyone was looking at me to see if I'm showing a little bit of hair from under my headscarf or something like that. And so the first couple of weeks, I was really like a little bit paranoid about those kind of things, but I wish I just hadn't been worried about any of that, because really everyone was so friendly, and sometimes my headscarf would fall off a little bit, and all that would happen is someone would come and maybe tug on my hair or something and sort of give me a little wink and tell me to put it back up. Yeah, so I wish I hadn't really thought about that, put it all to the back of my mind, because, I mean, obviously there are issues there, big international issues, but for the traveler, no one's going to come up to you and say, oh, you evil international person, or anything like that. It's not like that at all. They're really good at separating out what a government does and what an individual person does. So,
one, let's say, warning or word of advice you'd want to give people before going to Iran?
Because there is this really intense curiosity, sometimes it can get annoying. People love to speak English. Sometimes you just want to sit and read a book for 5 minutes. You need just some time to yourself. And so you go to a park and you sit down with your book, and within 5 minutes there's a group of people around you who all want to question you for half an hour intensely on your political beliefs. And what do you think? Iran? Better than America or worse than America? I just want to read my book, you know? And when you walk down the street, a lot of people will say, hello, mister, or hello, sister. So you get that, and that's kind of cute for the first 2 days, and then it wears off pretty quickly, hello, mister.
And be honest, was there ever a time you pretended you spoke only German?
No, there wasn't. It didn't matter. Even if someone didn't speak English, this is actually perplexing. This is true not only of Iran, but everywhere. Even if we're talking to someone and they don't speak English, and we make it clear that we only speak English or we don't speak their language, they keep on asking us questions in their language, as if by continuing to ask us questions we will somehow miraculously understand. Just, boom, I speak Uzbek. Doesn't really work that way.
We tend to speak louder when we think somebody doesn't understand our language. Is that just a American thing?
Yeah, they do that too.
They do that too?
Yeah,
okay.
No, they do that too. They speak louder, they speak more slowly. Yeah, and it doesn't really work, but anyway. And then sometimes they just sort of come to the realization that they can't communicate with you, and so then they just sort of sit and stare at you and sort of try and work out what to do next to you. Yeah. I mean, it's all very good-natured. Yeah, so sometimes that can get a little bit annoying just because you just want some time to yourself or whatever, and someone wanders up and insists on finding out where you're from and what you think of Iran and so on. And so then you just kind of have to take a deep breath and yeah.
Last question. Favorite either picture you took or item you're bringing home from Iran? I know you probably aren't bringing a lot of things since you're biking, but...
I was really excited because in Bukhara I bought a little gourd that had been dried out that you can keep spices in. It's only tiny, but I was really excited. That's the first souvenir I've bought in ages. If I had a lot of money, I would have bought a carpet.
Okay.
Carpets are absolutely beautiful, and I never thought that I would want a carpet. I resisted all the way through Morocco and Turkey and Syria. I resisted. I wasn't tempted. And in Iran, I was very tempted by some silk carpets. But I didn't bring a silk carpet home, so I guess it'll have to be picture. I took a lot of pictures of shepherds.
Okay.
We really love being just out there, and a picture of this one shepherd in this desolate landscape surrounded by about 3,000 sheep. Yeah. Shepherds are great. Love them.
And I said that was the last question. If you'll excuse me and give me one more, the most quintessential Iranian moment you had?
The barbecue with Ali in the park, the one I told you about near the shrine. That was really fantastic for us. There were so many like that. There was one day we were trying to get visas, and we were just banging our heads against the wall. Well, first of all, only about 1 in every 5 payphones actually worked in Iran. So first we had to run around and find one that actually worked. And then when we found one that worked sort of intermittently, and we got through to an embassy, everyone just seemed to speak Farsi. We had some wrong phone numbers and stuff. It really didn't take very long, and there were literally, I've got a picture of it, there were literally 10 people around us, and they were all on their mobile phones. They all, picked an embassy and called them and figured out what we needed to do to get our visas. I just thought, some people, at home, we'd pay, I don't know, hundreds of dollars to have a whole office of people working to get visas for us. In Iran, you just stand around on a street corner and look a little bit frustrated, and people come up with their mobile phones and decide they're going to call over the country to figure out what you need, and that's typically Iran. If you look the slightest bit out of place, disoriented, lost, troubled, someone's going to come up and say, "Can I help you? Can I be at your service?" And yeah, that's Iran for you. Fantastic.
Any last word that you'd want to leave with somebody who's going to do a trip like you're doing?
Just do it. Too often in life we just sit at home and we plan for tomorrow, and then tomorrow never comes, right? So if you want to go to Iran, then just go out and do it. Be persistent enough, I suppose, with Iran to work through the visa application. And that can be a bit trying. We didn't talk about that, but do we have time for me to talk about that for a second? Or?
I still have $1.78 in my Skype account here, so...
Excellent. Well, for Iran, it can be a bit difficult sometimes to get visas. Now, I'm not talking about Americans because we've already said they have to go on a tour, so that's a whole different kettle of fish, and you should just contact a tour company and go from there. The best thing with Iran, they like you to go through agents to get some sort of pre-approval number. And there's a lot of them on the internet if you do a search. So basically you pay somewhere in the range of $30 to $45 US, and you send off some basic details of your trip, like when you want to go and some of the key things you want to see. Like we just put in some of the main cities. And then they come back to you 3 weeks later with a code number, and then you take that to the Iranian embassy. And when you take your code number to the Iranian embassy, then usually the process is a whole lot smoother.
Okay.
Some embassies will insist that you have this code number first. And with that code number, we were able to get our visa in 1 day in Istanbul. It's not always as quick for people, but it can be very quick once you have this code number. If you try and do it on your own, without that pre-approval, sometimes it can take weeks, sometimes they just reject it. And the only other thing is that if you're a woman, in a lot of places you have to wear the hijab or headscarf in your passport photo. Mm-hmm. So remember that. Not actually in your passport itself, but when you submit 2 or 3 photos with your application, you should be wearing the headscarf in that.
And I should ask, would you have had problems if you were a single woman going? I know that's the case with Dubai, for instance. I wasn't sure. I didn't think that was the case with Iran.
I don't think so. Of all the Middle Eastern countries, I felt Iran was the most respectful towards women. Okay. Most people won't even shake your hand because they don't see that as respectful. So they just put their hands over their hearts when they greet you. I'll be totally honest here. We did have one time in Shiraz. We were leaving Shiraz on our bicycles, and one man reached out and grabbed me inappropriately. But I was very surprised at that, really surprised. And Andrew, as a good husband would, ran off to defend my honor. But when I told that story to my Iranian friends, they couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe it either, given the reception that I'd had everywhere else in the country and the way I'd been treated in general. So I think, okay, there's always that small chance that maybe you run across the one person who's not quite right in the head. But in general, I would say I felt safer in Iran than anywhere else.
Okay.
And, the very important, the most important thing about going to Iran is that you have to take all your money with you. They're completely disconnected from the banking system.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I can't believe we didn't mention that, but just saying safety made me think about it, because at the time I was really worried about going into a country and carrying like $2,000 on me. I thought, what if we get robbed? What's going to happen here? But yeah, you have to take all your money in cash, preferably in dollars or in euros.
Huh.
Yeah, because they have ATMs, but they're only Iranian ATMs. If you stick your card in, it's not going to do anything. Basically, nowhere takes credit cards. There's the odd carpet shop that will, and I guess they route their transactions through Dubai somehow.
Huh.
And so sometimes if you're in a real pinch, if you can find a carpet shop that'll take a credit card and you want to buy a carpet anyway, they'll give you an advance on your credit card, usually for a fee.
Interesting.
And otherwise, if you lose your money or something, you've got to get a bank transfer, but that takes a few days and it's a hassle. So if you're going to Iran, it's probably, I don't know, Iran, North Korea. I can't think of too many other countries where basically you cannot access money with your cash card. Traveler's checks, no good. Credit cards, no good.
Interesting.
Just cash. Cold, hard cash.
Good to know. And where can people read about and sometimes hear about your journeys?
Well, we have a website, and the address is www.traveling2.com, and that's traveling with 2 L's. So TRAVELLING2WO.com.
And I'll put a link to that in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com with 1 L. Thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us about your journeys. And I look forward to continuing to read and listen to them all. Also, now that you're doing some podcasts also.
Yes, and we look forward to listening to your podcast in our tent. Who knows, in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan or somewhere else.
I just find that very cool. Thanks for coming.
Okay, thank you very much.
I should say that since I talked to Friedel, I've gotten an email from she and Andrew that they were unable to get into China, which was their original plans, in part because China is not granting new visas right now between now and the Olympics. So that is throwing a little monkey wrench in their plans. They also can't go up into Russia because you have to apply for a visa from your home country. This show is already longer than usual, so I'm only going to do one internet resource, and that's just because it came up in the conversation. I do all of my interviews via Skype, and Skype does allow me to call a regular phone, and so in this case I was calling to a regular phone in a hotel in Uzbekistan, and it was about 11 cents a minute, which is probably the most expensive call I've ever made in Skype. And remember, I've been using it to call everywhere from Turkey to Sweden to England to Singapore. So I have a link on the show notes at amateurtraveler.com to Skype, as well as if you use that link, it would be an affiliate link for me and I'd get a few pennies. So check that out. And with that, we'll bring this episode of The Amateur Traveler to a close. You can find many ways to contact me at amateurtraveler/contact. I'm going to give you 2 today, which is a phone number, 917-720-2583. And there's also a button on the contact page that you can use, and I will call you back for free automatically. And then also, if you use Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter at the address Chris2X. And for more information on what Twitter is, you can check out my blog at chris2x.com. As always, thanks so much for listening.